Ones who dare to dream, we won't let anyone hold us back. We'll take the road, let's travel by and build our empire piece by piece. We've got our dreams and we've got a plan. We're not afraid to take a stand. We'll face the risks and embrace the fear, cause we know that success is near. There will be times when we'll fall down, but we'll get up and turn it around. We're entrepreneurs, we're not afraid to lose. We'll keep moving forward, we got nothing to prove.
Welcome to another episode of The Entrepreneur's Journey, a show that celebrates entrepreneurs, tells their story, lets them tell their story, because we are all heroes of our own story. We are all heroes of our own journey. You have to believe that. You have to believe that you are the hero. You're not the anti-hero. You're not the villain. Sometimes you might feel like it. Maybe that's a little bit of head trash going on. But we need more entrepreneurs in this world. We need them in general. They're the backbone. Small, medium business owners are the backbone of this world, of this economy, of the beautiful story about growth and about employment and about generational wealth. And at the end of the day, we need them to tell their story just a little bit more. And so today, without further ado, we're going to have, maybe I'll give you a little bit of ado, and then further ado we'll bring on Ed. I've chatted to him in the green room a little bit, Ed Gormbley, and this man, I'm just going to say it right now, this man is a philosopher. You know the old line that says, I'm a poet and I didn't know it? Well, he's a philosopher and hopefully he knows it. We're going to get into his philosophy, his vision in terms of the way he sees business, the way he's built his business, and the way business is going for the most part. Now, I like to start every episode with a quote, and of course, in my self-deprecating way, I'll say this is probably the first sign of narcissism when you start quoting yourself. But anyway, this is something that I said in on a panel, and it really resonated. It's normal to have growing pains or feel like you've hit the ceiling. It's not normal to accept this as being normal. So yes, there is pain. Yes, we understand that we have to go through sometimes these tests, these hoops, but we don't have to accept this as being the norm, and that this is part of what it is to be an entrepreneur. You can break through the ceiling and you can experience pleasure. And guess what? You deserve it as well. So my why statement: as a teacher, facilitator, and coach, I help high aspiring entrepreneurs, owners, and their leadership teams get unstuck, return to growth, and become forever change. And I've been fortunate to do that recently as an EOS implementer. As I was saying to Ed in the green room, when my brother approached me and said, "You'd be a great implementer," I said, "That sounds painful. I'm not very good with my hands, except to, be a keyboard warrior." But if you want to figure out if EOS is right for you, please go ahead and scan that QR code on the left, take the organizational checkup, or read the first chapter of Traction by founder Gina Wickman. So now it is time to bring the man on the show. And he has an impressive bio, I'm not going to lie. We've been able to whittle his bio down to just 1,000 words. I'm just kidding. Ed is an entrepreneur with big company skills and a startup spirit. It's a perfect combination. He started 3 companies before graduating from college. He then spent a decade in the fertile training ground of GE as a corporate finance professional and private equity investor, from which 3i recruited him to be their CFO of their North American division. From there, he founded Workforce Partners, a vertically integrated real estate company that serves the medium income household with apartments under the IVE brand and the boutique hotels, the Circle and Hi Ho. Edward maintains deep connections in the community through numerous volunteer activities, including as vice chair of the Fairfield Prep Board of Governors, board member of the Norwalk Housing Authority Foundation Scholarship Funds, trustee of his charitable foundation, manager of his son's Little League team, guest lecturer at Columbia University Business School, mentor at Fairfield Prep, and prior board member of the Boston University Alumni Council and the Norwalk Mutual Housing Association. where does he find time to breathe, to sleep, to eat? That is the first question I'm going to ask him. Edward earned his MBA from Columbia Business School's Executive MBA program and his BA magna cum laude in Sociology and Education from BU's Interdisciplinary University Professors Program. He and his wife have 3 kids. I wonder if he's met his 3 kids with whom he shares his love of taekwondo, boating, cycling, and reading. Let's welcome him on the show. Ed, where do you find time to do it all? Welcome to the show.
Great, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. Well, as you could tell, as we were in the green room getting set up and my daughter walked in, life always seems to mesh together. And my wife and I make it a priority to make sure the kids are included in a lot of what we do. So that we don't have separate spheres per se. We have a life, and that life has work, and that life has recharging, that life has family, and that life has playtime. And so we try to make it all fit together. That's how we do it.
Yeah, that was a little softball question because I saw your beautiful daughter in earlier as well. We got a comment already on LinkedIn from Ruben Lowing, who said, good morning. So, good morning back to you, Ruben.
Good morning, Ruben.
What a great way to start the day. Yeah, one of the things no doubt you've heard within the EOS framework is this idea of keeping the circles connected. And it just hit me as you were talking, this better apply to our personal lives as well as our professional lives, right?
It has to. In a sense, there's that old phrase about, do you have balance? I always thought that was a funny question. For me, it's much more about, do we have resonance? Does the thing we do at work every day support the life we want to lead, and vice versa, so that we don't have to worry about allocating time and allocating energy, but doing it all as one thing certainly makes it a lot more energizing for me.
I love that, resonance versus balance. The right stuff as opposed to the most stuff. So it's less about a percentage and more about quality, right?
That's a great way to put it.
So one of the things, I warned Ed in the green room. I said to him, have you watched the show before? And once he said yes, I knew that it was open season on AI. I feel that entrepreneurs are really heroes. They are heroes of their own journey, but actually entrepreneurs are superheroes. And so I decided to brief my little AI assistant. I was like, I want to know about the superhero that is Ed Gormbley, and I called you the broker. I just thought of like real estate, and so this is the broker. There you are. It's kind of, for some reason, I say for some reason, you're in the suit. I think it's maybe a Clark Kent type of character, but this is you. This is now your likeness as the broker. What do you think?
I love AI tools for stuff like this. You never know what it's going to come up with.
I'm telling you, and trust me, that is the least of your worries today. But part of the reason I did this was to be able to bring what I call, actually what David Brooks calls eulogy virtues to the table. We're very, very, even when you look at your bio, it's a resume. There's resume virtues, all your accomplishments, which are incredible. Also, we start to cross over into eulogy virtues, which is charity, which is giving back, philanthropy, volunteering, etc. And I think when you get to know the person and the human behind the suit, everything changes. Now, that's the sublime. Now let's talk about the ridiculous, because apparently you can do the split. Very impressive.
That's pretty good.
So this is one hell of a party trick. And tell us more about how this has helped you in life, in love, in business.
Well, I can't wait to show my kids this, because they're going to say my split's not that good, but that's just because I'm older and they're still young and doing it very easily. So I started out in gymnastics when I was young, and then around 10, 11 years old, switched to Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art, and did that for a very, very long time and still practice occasionally. That entails lots of stretching, and I used to be able to do a split that was probably about as good as in that picture. Now that I'm older, my wife reminds me it's not a good idea to pull that out without stretching first. I don't always remember to do that, but most recently I was out at a CEO function, and in the middle of a kind of a regular dance party at the end of this thing, did a split, and the whole crowd erupted, and everybody said, "I can't believe I've known you all these years, and you didn't know you could do a split." So it does come in handy. It is a crowd pleaser.
Well, listen, it's a party trick that if I ever tried it, there would be a trip to the ER. So we will not try that anytime soon. Leanne is here and said, "Good morning. Hi, Ed and Joseph." Hello, Leanne. So we wanted to say hello to her too. Ed, I tell you what I can do, mental gymnastics. I cannot do
Mhm,
physical gymnastics. And the reason why I always ask these fun facts is there's always a connection back to the topic at hand.
mhm.
So you spoke even in your commencement address at Fairfield Prep, which we'll get into a little bit later. You spoke about being a rubber band and stretching. And of course, the other aspect to this is agility, the ability
Mhm.
to stretch, the ability to be agile and flexible. Talk a little bit about the importance of agility and flexibility as an entrepreneur in business.
I think in life, it's absolutely critical, particularly as the world changes and we have to draw on our old ancient knowledge to figure out what to do next. You need to have very strong foundation. And on top of that, great agility. Agility without foundation is just chaos. I like to think with a great foundation, you can adapt to the situation without creating chaos. And now, admittedly, that is a fine balance. And I'm sure there are times when I slip into chaos, but there are enough foundations in my life that I can pull back and rely on the foundations while still adapting to the world. And that allows me to capitalize on things, whether that's in business or that's in my nonprofit work. When we see an opportunity pop up for a particular gift or a particular charitable contribution that comes at the right time, we can pounce on it. For example, during the midst of COVID, it became known to me that there were of many inner city families, intergenerational in my area, that couldn't get a hold of masks. And I had a friend who happened to be in the mask business, and we scooped up about 15,000 masks that were on a boat between Asia and North America without a buyer. And I just stepped in and bought those masks and donated them. So it's just a particular example that if we had waited weeks and months to figure it out, it never would have happened. But because we were able to be agile and jump on it, we made it happen.
You know, you said something that really resonated with me, talking about resonance. You said agility without foundation is chaos. If I got that right. How do you define foundation? What is foundation in this context?
I think in life, in my life anyway, there's a pretty clear set of foundations around how we should behave in the world and what things work and what things don't. So at a most basic level, the golden rule: you treat people as you want to be treated.
Right.
Uh, in a more kind of close to home, the family life. So I've always been a big believer that if I can't get my family life right, I can't get my business right, and so family's got to come first. Those foundations, and then of course, amidst of that, my wife is a significant, probably the best decision I've ever made, and I hope that she's ever made, to get married and build a life together, because without that foundation, we couldn't do all the things that we're able to do. So that's how I think about it, those kinds of foundations. And then look, of course, it gets a little bit more kind of pedantic day to day. So you need to be healthy. You need to be physically healthy, mentally healthy. You need to sleep enough. You need to eat well to be able to do all the things and expend all the energy that I do on my various activities.
We did actually verify that with your wife, and she indeed confirmed that that was the best decision she ever made. So I'm just letting you know, because
Oof.
our fact checkers here in the studio are quite extensive. I really appreciate that thought, and I promise, no, I'm not going to put your head on Chuck Finney's body. But the other fun fact, if you will, that you shared is that your hero in business and life is Chuck Finney, who built a multi-billion-dollar fortune through various businesses and then gave it away. Um, you almost inspired me to ask this question, which I hadn't even thought of, to all my guests, which is, who is your role model, in life, personally, professionally? Tell us a little bit more about Chuck Finney.
So he was a born entrepreneur. In World War II, he figured out how to get the GIs goods that they wanted: cars, clothes, etc., at the various ports when they pulled in. And that business turned out to be an utter failure. But from the ashes of it, he figured out that there was a set of laws within the trade agreements that allowed you to move alcohol without paying tax on it. And that became the duty-free stores, which we all know from the airports. Well, the duty-free stores went on to become wildly successful over the years, multi-billions of dollars. And he had three partners. He saw one, if not both of them, starting to spend that money extravagantly. And the more they spent, the less he spent. He started to live a very frugal lifestyle, got rid of his houses, focused in on doing charitable work all over the world. And so what he did was he really became the best example of capitalism in action, which is to say that he used the tools and the techniques of capitalism to identify problems, get them resourced, and solve them. He just applied them in the nonprofit space as well as he had done in the for-profit space. And that became the legacy for the second half of his life. So after the duty-free stores, he also started a private equity company called General Atlantic, which is a huge private equity player. And that became essentially his family office for managing all sorts of his of his money and then of others. And then he started the Atlantic Philanthropies, which gave away a significant amount of money, including, I think, something like $7 billion, including Cornell's new campus in New York City, funded multiple hospitals, played a key role in the Northern Ireland peace talks. And he was just involved everywhere he could find to make a positive impact. He did, and he did it totally under the radar. His giving, and this is what he's really known for only after the fact, is he did it anonymously. No one knew for 30, 40 years who this guy was until it started to leak out. And so I just love that he did it very well with the tools of capitalism, used it for a selfless goal, and did it without any fanfare.
You spoke about this idea of capitalism in action, and this is a little bit of a philosophical question, but I wonder what is the role of the entrepreneur in terms of shaping capitalism, in terms of something that you are committed to, which is the community, the environment in which you operate, so that we aren't just exploiting and the land and all of these resources, but actually playing a role and leaving some kind of lasting legacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you go back to the etymology of what an entrepreneur is, right, it comes from the French in the 1700s, and it is someone who leads or organizes an endeavor and takes risks to do it. And so the implication of that is it's not just business related. There are academic entrepreneurs who lead a new idea and take a risk to their reputation. There are nonprofit entrepreneurs who do interesting things in ways that hadn't been considered before. There are entrepreneurs in government. In my world, the low-income housing tax credit was a big idea in the late 1980s, which has transformed how affordable housing gets funded. So these ideas are risky, and I think the entrepreneur's role is to connect the dots across all the static things that are happening in the world around them and coming up with new ways and better ways to do them. So I think sometimes there is a slippery slope when the focus of the entrepreneur is only on making money. That's one measurement, but it's not the only measurement. So I think we have to be aware of the other important things in our lives. As I said, I've got my foundations, and you may have noticed money wasn't in there. So entrepreneurs that are out in the world, they can have really positive impacts by just connecting the dots and seeing things that other people don't see. We're all wired, entrepreneurs are particularly wired a little bit differently to see opportunities in a hyper rational way, when other people look at them and go, that's crazy, and entrepreneurs go, that seems like a great idea. If no one is telling you an idea is crazy, you probably haven't thought about it enough.
I love that as well. And I also love the way that you talk about this idea of connecting the dots. When I mentor startup founders, I always say to them, open your ears, open your eyes. What do you see? What do you feel? What frustrates you? What annoys you? What makes you curious? So many times, even going back to the story with Chuck, it comes down to that there are those who see things and ask why, and then those who see things that could be and ask why not. And that is a form of connecting the dots, is it not?
Absolutely. I totally agree. I love that quote. I replay that in my mind multiple times.
All right, so we're talking about entrepreneurial journey. We're talking about how people connect dots. Let's talk about your journey, your entrepreneurial journey, and feel free to go all the way as far back as you wish. But the floor is yours, the stage is yours. Tell us how we got to this moment today.
Well, I could go pretty far back, which so be careful what you wish for. But look, I think we're all a product of those who came before us, whether they're relatives or they're thought leaders. In my case, it's a bit of both. So my family is a very classic Irish immigrant family. My grandfather was the first one born in this country, and that was to a home for unwed mothers in Brooklyn. He was then adopted into a family in Connecticut and eventually went on to have 10 kids. My mom is one of them. So my mom never finished high school. She was a bartender, a very smart lady, very hardworking, but didn't have the same opportunities that she wanted me to have. And so really put education at the forefront and encouraged me to do well. In fact, at one point, I remember her telling me she had wanted me to be a poet, which I still like to play around with now and again. But the point is that with her resilience and scrappiness to try to figure out how to raise us kids, I was the oldest of five, how to raise kids, do it as a single mom, as a bartender, as somebody who just wanted better for her kids. You figure out that necessity really is the mother of invention.
Mm.
And so when I would hit problems, and I've had plenty of problems in life as is everyone else, I've come to see them a lot more as opportunities. And every time I think my life is hard, I think, wow, how could I have raised a bunch of kids with almost no income back when she did it? And she did it, right? And so she's always very impressive to me in that regard. Not perfect, by the way, nobody is, but I think that's also one of the great lessons of entrepreneurship is that you're gonna fail and you're gonna be imperfect. And if you're afraid of that, it's gonna get in the way of doing something bigger. And so I try to shoot for higher highs with not so many lows per se, right? You don't want to be on a roller coaster, but really stretching to push the limit, which I think is really the essence of entrepreneurship. So that's on the family side, and then on the more thought leader side, I got the great privilege to study under some great thinkers when I was at Boston University in this little interdisciplinary program. And one of them was an economist named Glenn Lowry, who happened to write the PhD thesis in the 70s that articulated for the first time social capital and what that actually means in the context of an economy. So he was a great influence on me and remains so to this day. I like to think he and a bunch of other professors, Leah Greenfeld, who was my sociology professor, really helped me think about the why of society, why we do certain things, not just because we do them again and again, but why do we get out of bed to do whatever? Why do wars start? Why do people value certain things? There's actual history to go back and track and understand the current modern moment we find ourselves in and why that's distinct from other parts of the world. So being very rigorous with facts was essential thing that I learned there with her. And so I put those things together, and when I started my own company, I said, I'm going to go back to what I know a little bit, which is construction, and I'm gonna combine it with all the sophistication I learned in undergraduate school and at General Electric to try to capitalize on an opportunity and a challenge and turn it into an opportunity, which was really around how to create more affordable housing in the area in which I grew up.
You spoke about the influence that your mother had in your life. I can relate. I personally was brought up by a single parent, and she said that she thought maybe that you'd be a poet, but turns out she was almost right, because I think you became a philosopher. How about this one? This is a good one, right, Ed? This is
That's
you
pretty
as
good.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna send you this one at no charge. Let me tell you. Um, but this the bust of Edwardius Gormbley. But there's so many things that you talk about that are quite profound. we're going to, we're going to get into, I was just so like blown away by this commencement address. But in fact, let's just do that. I don't even know where to start, but there was just a few things that you spoke about. You spoke about adversity as a gift. You spoke about the concept of anti-fragile. But really, it comes back to this concept, right? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. This is definitely a common thread in your life, which is how to play the hand you're dealt and how to kind of take, I'm sure there's a taekwondo aspect to it as well in terms of energy and how you actually can deal with the circumstances and use them to your advantage.
Absolutely. Look, I think we're all products of things we've seen and done and been a part of. And as I get older, I realize that a lot of that is also due to where I focus my time and energy. And so I'm trying to be more deliberate about that and not just be kind of a victim of circumstance, as it were. But what I think about in all the experiences I had was that none of them killed me. A lot of them set me back, and I have many throughout time, many mistakes, either self-inflicted as well as just the world around. And what I kind of appreciate is that the ancient wisdom around what doesn't kill us makes us stronger has now been validated in a bunch of the academic studies, whether they're distilled down in common literature today, like the book Grit, or Jonathan Haidt, who is a great social philosopher down at NYU now, spending a lot of time on how our kids are lacking in grit and they need more adversity. Right? These are big trends that are happening throughout society and have been, in particular, in the case of Jonathan Haidt's study, since essentially the early 80s. And so you have kids that have had almost no adversity, almost no ability to have a failure because parents don't want them to fail. And look, I don't want my kids to fail either. But if they don't, they're not going to learn how to figure it out on their own. And it's a delicate balance because you don't want it to kill them. But in a sense, I think that's one of the great gifts of being a parent is you learn how to sacrifice both yourself and your time and the resource you have to put into your children, but also you're in a sense sacrificing your kids to the world and helping them become full people. Because without that opportunity to try something that we might fail at, we're not going to get stronger, whether it's me or my kids or anybody around us. So look, I think it's really important. I think it's reflected in a lot of ancient literature, go all the way back to the Stoics at the turn of the first millennia, all the way to today, and how we conduct our political discourse, how we think about problem solving. These are trade-offs that we have to make in our world, and there's no free lunch about it, to steal an old economist's phrase.
I'm going to give you the first official air horn because I mean, couldn't have said it better. I think this is a very natural almost segue. That's something that is also part of the whole EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System journey. And, I want to know about, there are many questions about it, but I'm just going to like jump straight into the middle because we're just, two guys hanging out together, which is how do you deal with adversity? Well, actually, how do you deal with adversity professionally? How do you deal? I mean, I suppose we call that issues, but from a day-to-day as an entrepreneur, as an operator, how have you culturally and structurally incorporated and dealt with adversity as a almost kind of anti-up or a cost of doing business?
It's a great question. I have to say, I was not good at this many years ago, and I've gotten better only through necessity. When I used to try to be perfect and we got to get it all right, but that sets a completely unrealistic expectation for the team where they don't want to bring problems to you because you're going to jump down their throat because something's not perfect. And so I've dramatically changed that over the last few years and been trying to be very deliberate about it. One of the things I loved about EOS is it builds that mechanism into the framework on a weekly basis. And so to your point, etymologically, we do not use the word problems. We talk about issues, right? Great way to frame it up.
Mm.
So what I try to do is we say, okay, what's going on? How are we going to tackle this? And I try to be more accommodating and forgiving of myself for the mistakes I make, much more publicly rewarding for the folks who make a mistake, but was done with all the great intention. Something just didn't work out right, and we try to talk about all these problems as solvable, and we're going to solve them together. No one individual has to carry the whole burden. That's why we have a team. Likewise, when we celebrate, we're going to celebrate together. So I think your question is a great one, because getting this out into the team, into the broader world of my team, and frankly beyond my team, but to other users of EOS, this is the really important part about EOS. I think is that it is a culture carrier. It provides a framework to make all these things expedited, right? Whether it's how you communicate, it's the values you set, it's the way you go about the mechanisms of doing business. EOS makes all that stuff easier because it's just built in, right? You obviously pick your own values, you pick your own goals, you highlight your own issues that might be particular to your team, but EOS provides the framework which simplifies and eases that whole process.
I'm going to do something. This is a precedent busting moment, because he got 2 air horns back to back. It has never been done in 800 episodes. There are a couple of things that I want to double tap on.
Mhm.
The concept of, right, it's not problems, they're issues. But something that just hit me is they're set up as solvable.
Mhm.
And the goal is that they will be solved, as opposed to something that cannot be solved, or something that is that, we often use the phrase, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a
Mhm.
time. And it never hit me until just now that when you come into it with a deliberate, intentional, shared, almost obsessive goal of solving it, guess what? They become solvable.
That's right. And breaking it down into solvable chunks, I think, is a really important point you made that I want to underscore. He eats the whole elephant at once.
Right. And of course, we might call those to-dos, we might call those
Mhm.
issues, we might call those rocks or something else. So Ed, you're you're on your entrepreneurial journey. Tell us about life before EOS, and how you came to find this system and begin to implement it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've thought about that a lot. So EOS is a common language, and I had learned a common language when I was at General Electric. Very strong culture, very clear communication channels, very explicit metrics and deliverables. But what I learned after that, in talking to our implementer Kat and her team leader Rick Fawcett, is the perspective they gave me is, yeah, GE did have a strong culture, but you know who else had strong cultures? Motorola, AT&T, Microsoft, the military, you name it. The problem is they're all slightly different. And if you're joining a small team where you have people from each of those backgrounds, even though they had some sort of cultural background, it still needs to get integrated. And what EOS does quite well is it allows people from different cultures to integrate, as well as help people who didn't come from a very strong culture to plug into and start to work. So so you ask how it's changed for me. Well, when I started my company, I had all of the toolkits of having an Ivy League MBA and having 10 years in corporate finance. So I felt like I had a very strong common language, but when I communicated with my team, it wasn't clear to them. So what EOS has done is given us a common language that we've learned together, as well as an implementer in Cat in our case, who helps us communicate with each other, who led us through a values building exercise and a visioning exercise to take pieces of what all of us had to offer, and all of us saw different elements of it. To borrow your elephant metaphor, there's the old metaphor of the blind men and the elephant, and each one touches a different piece, and they think they have the one who touches the trunk thinks he has a snake, and the one who touches the leg thinks he has a tree. Well, that's how I felt we were operating. Now, with EOS and the common language, it's like we have our blinders off and we can all see the whole elephant.
Well, you know what? I see your element. Your element. That's Freudian. I see your elephant, and I raise you a snake-headed. No, I mean, that's great, right? It's everyone being on the same page. It's the Tower of Babel. It's, it's the fact that our vision is trapped inside our bodies, and what we believe is ultimately our vision may not necessarily be received. And as we know, that you could have 7 people around the table with 7 different ideas of that vision. Was that the main benefit? That what was the first benefit? What became immediately obvious once you started to implement the system? What changed? What was the first change you noticed?
I would say the first change was basic operating mechanisms, having everybody who had a single call that we were all on once a week and buying into that. Instead of having multiple calls where I would do essentially one-on-ones with each department, now the leaders of those departments were all on one page and they could resolve issues together, even when I wasn't there, which was kind of part of what we were sold in the beginning and made a lot of sense and has been great. What I was surprised by, to take your question a bit further, was the values and vision piece. I thought I had laid out a pretty clear value and a vision, laid out a clear vision with very clear values behind it. But apparently they weren't so clear. And so when everyone got in the room and were asked to offer their feedback, we tweaked mine. And now they're even better than they were before. So our values, our 3 values are: get shit done, do it the right way, and stay in the flow. Super simple. Took us a year to year and a half to nail those down. But that's how we operate as a leadership team. And we call each other out for doing those things well. And it's been wonderful. I did not expect that piece, the values and the vision, to have such an impact on how we operate every day. It seems to have allowed us to work with less communication in a sense because we're now on the same page.
There's so much there that I just, like all I'm thinking inside, I'm feeling these weird emotions, and I'm thinking, why do more entrepreneurs not just get the simplicity of everyone being on the same page? Number one. Number two, this idea that what we believe is the reality may not necessarily be the reality. The fact that less is more, less meetings where everyone is together instead of this fragmentation. You just basically outlined what I would call a master playbook, and yet it's so simple. One of my first mentors once said to me, marketing is common sense, but how many of us have common sense?
It's not so common, as we like to say in my business.
I'm telling you. So let's embarrass her a little bit as well. Catherine Hennessy, or Kat as she's known. They say that a coach is anywhere on the continuum of a cheerleader to a drill sergeant. Where does Kat sit on that continuum?
I'd say more cheerleader, which is fine. We're able to drill ourselves, but she does hold us accountable for things that we're missing. What Kat has been really good at, well, I have to take a step back. Number one, she's very sincerely, emotionally invested in what we do, and I'm assuming all of her clients. Very invested, which is wonderful. She wants us to do well, and she cares. But to answer your question, what she does really well is keep us in our quarterly conversations, in our quarterly updates with her, keeps us on an agenda that is structured yet fluid enough to allow us to adapt to the issues that pop up. And so, whether she's teaching the team about the financial linkages to the operations, or we're talking about what tool to use when we do our quarterly evals with our team members, she keeps it factual but flexible enough to apply it to any business out there, including ours. So she's just been great. Real joy to work with.
Well, she's taught me a lot. I'm not gonna lie, and and I like the continuum as well, which is the cheerleader. But you yourself have become self-policing of of being able to enforce the accountability. It's actually something you wrote earlier, and I thought that was interesting. You almost said it was. And I'm going to put words in your mouth, if I may, that it's almost like a drawback of EOS that you only see them once a quarter, but yet in that, but what it does is it's pushing you to be self-sufficient and say, no one's going to be holding your hand and spoon feeding you. You get the 90-day check-in, the quarterly check-in, and then guess what? Get back to work and figure it out.
That's well said. Yeah, I've talked to Kat about this more in the beginning when I was expecting more hand-holding, I guess is the best way I can put it. Uh, but the culture and learning the culture, it's got to get imprinted on both of our brains. I have a friend who was in the military and in startups, and when we talked about scaling a business, he said, the most scalable thing has been done already. It's culture. Culture scales, it self-polices. When people buy into it, they want other people to be a part of it and they reinforce it. And that's part of the magic of what happens with a common culture. EOS is just one of them. But that common culture becomes a vetting tool to allow only certain people onto the team. It becomes an enforcement mechanism to make sure that those people on the team are doing are living the culture. And if that culture is set right from the beginning, and I happen to think ours is, it leads to great things with far less energy than would have been required otherwise. To use your words, it does become kind of self-policing, self-perpetuating.
Culture scales, or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's just it's the beginning of the end. How did you find when you created your core values? I've never actually even asked anyone this question. Tell me about, first of all, I don't even know. I don't even know what your title, are you the visionary? I'm assuming you're the visionary.
I'm the visionary. As Kat said, though, before EOS, I was probably the visionary and the integrator, and the chef, cook, and bottle washer. So I did a little bit of everything.
You were trapped in the integrator's body.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. But yeah, look, when I started my business, it was one building that I collected the rent for, fixed the pipes, called the landscapers, paid the bills, etc. And 40 buildings later, it just wasn't sustainable. So I knew I needed other people, and I had hired folks in, but hadn't done all that great of a job of making sure that they were operating independently and really as a team. So look, frankly, EOS has taught me a lot about how to manage, and it's no mistake that I've been implementing EOS now for almost 2 years, and I've seen tremendous growth in my own leadership skills as the business has gotten more in line with the EOS way of thinking.
It's amazing. Look, if I had to put all my money in the world on whether you were the visionary or the integrator, I think that was fairly obvious because of the philosophical aspect. But I've now gone ahead and legally changed your name to Eduardius Gormbley, philosopher and managing partner at Workforce Partners. So there you go.
That's pretty funny.
Look, there's one more little AI image, and this is in no way, I don't know how tall or how short you are. This is not about your height or your stature, but I had to see what you look like as one of the 7 dwarfs, and this is how you came out in the end. And of course, why am I showing this? Because of the hi ho, hi ho, hi ho. It's off to work we go. This is a magnificent project, and I just wanted to, I often drive past. I eat at Barcelona, just below. Tell us a little bit about the hi-ho, and I mean, there's a beautiful historical story about it. I just, it's a magnificent project, so I just wanted to give you a few moments to talk about it.
Yeah, sure. The hi-ho it's one we're known the most for because it was infamous before we even got to it. So the backstory of the property is that it was built by a guy sometime in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, and he was in aggregates, casinos, and hotels, and had a suspicious demise in the late 80s. And so we all thought, oh, this is an interesting place. So when the caretaker first keyed us into the building when we bought it almost 10 years ago now, we looked into the rooms, which we hadn't been able to see before, and we said, when were the mattresses last changed? And we said, let's see, the prior owner died in 87. So yeah, right around then. And we said, oh boy. So we proceeded to do a gut renovation of the building. Actually, gut is too strong of a word. It was significantly cosmetically impaired, and we fixed all that. It is a beloved asset in the town. I can't say how many times in the town hall folks would bring up what they remember of the hotel from when they were kids. And there was always something infamous about it, whether it was the parties that were thrown there by the local university students or the carousing that was done by the local corporate types. It all had this kind of very funny off-color type of history. And to the extent that when we pulled the sign down for repairs 7 years ago, let's say, a Facebook group exploded about the sign. And this was, I think, on the Moms of Fairfield Facebook page about, oh my God, they're taking down the sign. They can't take down the sign. I said, it's okay. We're putting this, the sign is just getting repaired. It's going to be put back up. So it was a great project. The restaurant Barcelona that's in there now, Adam, who's the CEO, is a great operator. They are just a real class act. They know how to deliver a great experience, and we've been happy to work with them. And we like to think that that project has led to some redevelopment efforts in the area. And so now, just across the street, Hartford Healthcare has announced the first of its kind partnership with Sloan Kettering in Connecticut. So it's first outpost to do cancer treatments. And we're very excited to work with them and serve that client base over time. So yeah, a very fun project.
I've seen the development that is. In fact, I went out took one of my visionaries out for drinks. Of course, being a proper visionary, he 20 minutes later he hasn't shown, and I text him and he goes, oh, was it today? He was like, don't move, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'm buying. And you know, I almost needed a room at the Hi Ho afterwards. That's another story for another day. No, I'm glad you told that story, and you know, it is beloved, and I think what you've done as well is you've embraced the history, the heritage. I think you've been true to your core values in terms of thinking about community. It's affordable for sure, and you know, as I said, it's just a great story, and it plugs into this beautiful trend right now, Ed, which is, I don't know whether it's glamping or motels and hotels that are being turned into these very trendy little chic, cheap chic type of places.
Yeah, we call it shabby chic.
Shabby chic. I'm telling you, like, I'm writing that one down. shabby chic. You know, it's beautiful because, like, the DoubleTree Hotel with their chocolate chip cookies, that you can have both, the best of both worlds. You can bring two worlds together that are seemingly diametrically opposed and find a happy medium.
Yeah, look, and I think it's funny, the way you just put that is going to make me articulate something I've not said before, so it's maybe clumsy, but in a sense, developing a hotel brand, developing a company of any kind, and the values we just laid out are all really linked insofar as you need to pick and go. Pick a prioritization, pick a value, pick a standard, pick a brand, and live to that brand. Make it work. Stay true to it. So in our case, we do try to serve the median income household, and so our rates are half, if not a third, of the local luxury property in town. And we're able to do that because we've been very smart with how we operate, and we're able to stay true to the mission of our core customer. Of course, it'd be much easier to do something much more extravagant and increase the rates significantly, but that's not the heritage of that particular property.
Well, I've just been informed by my producer that Nike has changed their tagline from "just do it" to "pick and go." So residuals and royalties will be flowing. And Ed, you know, pick and go also, what that tells me is this idea of, you know, it is just do it. It's avoid the procrastination. It's make a decision. You know, I even think back to Napoleon Rich's Think and Grow Rich. It's like indecisiveness will kill you. Making the wrong decision quickly is better than making the right decision slowly?
Yeah, so I think it's a little context dependent. I agree. I agree with that for the most part, but there are some businesses and decisions in life that really are very long and drawn out. Very regulatory heavy businesses, for example, you have to be very cautious. And I worked in the energy business for some time, where you plan out 20-year projects, and so you just have to understand, I think, the situation you're in, and make sure that you're acting in harmony with what that situation demands. So if you're, for example, a Wall Street trader and you're in and out of positions multiple times a day, that's one thing. If you're planning to build a power plant, that's a completely different thing. But you have to know where you are. And I think one of the mistakes entrepreneurs make is not knowing where they are, not knowing the situation in which they're in. This reminds me, I had a great class at Columbia called Napoleon's Glance. And it's chapter by chapter of great entrepreneurs in a variety of fields. And it starts out with literally Napoleon and how you develop the judgment. So they call it Napoleon's Glance, the coup d'oeil, right? The flash of insight that happens in the moment, which is formed by years of experience to distill down into a judgment call. And the thing about judgment calls is we're not going to get them all right, but hopefully we get them more right than not. I think really that's the essence of being an entrepreneur, making that judgment call to where to apply resources, given the risk involved, and try to find the most leverageable point to apply those resources.
Well, I'm going to say it in my South African way, Napoleon's Glance. I think that might be the title of the biography, the memoirs of Edward Gormbley, Napoleon's Glance. But Ed, and I love this. This is almost like we're playing what I'd call intellectual pickleball. Is that what you're talking about is self-awareness, and which is important. Every entrepreneur is different. Every situation is different. It isn't a one size fits all. But I also think back, even going back to your long drawn out example, just the ability to shorten that lead time, even if it's by 1% or 2%. So even if the shortened time moves from 3 years to, let's say, 2 years and 11 months, that can have significant impact implications, even competitive advantage. So
Sure.
I like that. I think we've kind of like built almost a philosophy around decisiveness together.
That's a nice way to put it.
All right. So I want to make sure before we go that I talk about something else. It was very personal to me. You were telling about the story when you were a kid, and how you were truant at one point, how you'd fallen in with the wrong crowd. And one of your professors said this to you: imagine what you would have achieved if you just showed up. I got goosebumps then. I got goosebumps now. I'm not going to show you. I'm not going to do the splits. But to me, this is profound, and it's worth spending a few minutes on, because isn't like 90% of life is just showing up. And our kids, this next generation, they don't see it. They can't see it. They peel away from adversity. But just showing up. I want you to talk about this, if not your own story, but just this idea of how important it is. And I do want to ask you another part to it, which is, what was the turnaround? What led to your turnaround from this kid that was kind of falling back to the leader that you are today? I know it's a big question.
It is, but I'm happy to tackle both. So let me start with the first one, which is the context for that quote you put up there was a teacher of mine in my junior year, senior year. And what he was reacting to is that I had been a straight A student at a prestigious school and had completely fallen off the wagon and was kind of clocking in around a 2.2 is what I ended up graduating with. And the reason that happened, because I was very distracted by other things in my life. Partly was just being a teenager, but other things were, financial difficulties at home. The house we had been living in was foreclosed, and I had to move. My mom got divorced from her second husband. There were a series of things that happened in about an 18-month period that forced me to be pretty independent and that included going to work. And so roughly every Wednesday I was skipping school. And in the beginning, I was signing my own excuse notes. And the way I justified this to myself was I signed it as Mr. Gormbley. So I was Mr. Gormley, but it clearly wasn't my dad, who wasn't in my life anyway. Thankfully, the principal at this school was a lot wiser than I was at that point, and knew me and liked me. He pulled me aside and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean? I have to go to work." And he said, "Okay, do me a favor. Every time you have to skip to go to work, call me in the morning just so I know you're okay, please."
Mm.
And this is 30 years ago, when this notion of supporting the whole kid may not have been as relevant as it is today. And we talk about it a lot today. Well, here, this principle helped me navigate through was a very trying time. And despite all those difficulties, the subjects I really enjoyed, in this case, my chemistry teacher was really, really sharp chemistry teacher. He said, "Edward, you got a C plus in my class. Imagine if you had just showed up." So this is the thing I often reflect back on, and I'm very proud to say I was able to have that teacher in the audience when I gave that speech a couple of months ago, because I really appreciated it. He put it in stark relief. There was no beating around the bush. He didn't love me for it. He didn't hate me for it. He was just very clear and said, "Hey, just think about it." So in a sense, he created a vision for me of what could be. And while that was not my turning point, the turning point was a series of events. Shortly thereafter, at the end of my senior year, I was just totally fried. I was cooked emotionally, and would probably be described now as burnout. And I just didn't go to school right away. I just spent a lot of time on my own. I worked during the summer, but then during the winter time, I withdraw. And the kids I was hanging out with were other kids who were completely withdrawn and probably not the best, most motivating group of people to be around. And one night got arrested. It was in the midst of a bar fight with one of these guys who was a friend of mine, but we were all being knuckleheads, and I tried to protect him in the midst of a brawl, and both of us got arrested. So that was a pretty clear signal that maybe I needed to do something a little different. And that, whatever that was, 18 or 19, thank goodness I had a lot of time to correct. So I then decided I probably had too much idle time. And so, like, there's that saying, at least at my school where I went, idle hands are the devil's plaything. And so what we then figured out, or I figured out, is I need to go back to school. I needed to make a serious effort to do well. I then got into competing. So I got back into Taekwondo, which I had given up for a couple of years, and then went to the national tournament 2 or 3 years in a row, while doing very well back in college, and being able to get into this very unique program for interdisciplinary studies at Boston University with luminaries, Saul Bellow, Nobel Prize winner, in a class with 12 people reading books about the man on the make in Balzac. And he telling me, "Look, this is you, kid. Like, this is you. Your story has been told before, and there are other outcomes than the path that you were on." It's a very long answer to a short question, but that's how it's happened, and that's why I say adversity is a gift. I wouldn't have had those experiences and been able to relate to folks who were in that position if I hadn't gone through it. I could probably intellectualize it, but to be able to have the credibility to stand up there and talk to other kids at my alma mater about what it means to have adversity and how you recover from it, I wouldn't have been able to do that, I don't think, without that experience.
I'm gonna try and reframe as succinctly as I can, which is not something I do very easily. You're nothing special, but you can be. That's how I bring it all together. Your story has been told. Your story has been told before many, many times, but you don't have to accept the outcome. And so it normalizes the struggles that teens have, that maybe troubled youth have, that people that are lost have, that don't have the motivation. And then it's up to them to be able to be truly the hero of their own journey, whether it's an entrepreneurial journey or something else.
Or whatever it might be. And I think, Joe, that comment of hero is what these kids need to hear. they are heroes of their own story. They just have to accept that.
No doubt. Well, I have to tell you, Ed, that I've done a few of these now with entrepreneurs, with visionaries. Both were visionaries, and the overwhelming feeling I get is I get a couple of things. One is I think I would like to work with this. In this case, I would like to work with this man. I don't mean as a coach. I mean, like, I would want to give him business. I really would want to collaborate with him and with his company, because when you get to know the person, when you get to understand what motivates them, what makes them tick, it's hard not to fall in love with them and their vision and their mission and want to be a part of it. I also think, how lucky Kat must be, and probably how lucky you must be too, because it is truly a partnership. And the beautiful thing about it is it's really what you make of it. The third thing that resonates with me is seeing EOS in action, truly liberating you, freeing you, and giving you the wings to soar and quite frankly, be that hero of your own journey, not being the hero. EOS is not the hero, nor is the coach. And quite frankly, nor are you as the visionary. It's everyone combined as kind of a dream team. Teamwork makes the dream work. And so, like, I've just thoroughly loved this time we spent together.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I really appreciate the exploration.
So I'm going to always give you the last word. But I think that I like to always ask this question as a parting question, which is, based on everything you've learned and where you are now, and no doubt that you are a poet and you didn't know it, and we'll forget about the Seven Dwarfs, but definitely Eduardius Gormbley. What's a piece of advice or wisdom that you'd offer up, other than what you've already done so eloquently with Fairfield Prep? But from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what is a piece of advice that you'd want to give to people that are either aspiring entrepreneurs or maybe even just struggling right now as entrepreneurs?
Let me key off the struggling part, which is you're only beat until you don't get back up.
Fair enough. And what about aspiring? Would you want your kids to be entrepreneurs?
I think in many ways my kids already are, whether they like it or not. I think it is a noble calling. I think kids who are around entrepreneurs have the entrepreneurial spirit built into them. And I already see it in how my kids behave. And actually one of them already has a couple of businesses at 12 years old.
I love it. And you know what? In 15 to 20 years, I look forward to welcoming them on the entrepreneur's journey. I might have a few more gray hairs, but I look forward.
We both will.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you, Ed. And I will see you around.
Great. Thank you.
We're the ones who dare to dream. We won't let anyone hold us back. We'll take the road, let's travel by and build our empire piece by piece. We've got our dreams and we've got a plan. We're not afraid to take a stand. We'll face the risks and embrace the fear, cause we know that success is near. There will be times when we'll fall down, but we'll get up and turn it around. We're entrepreneurs, we're not afraid to lose. We'll keep moving forward, we got nothing to prove.